This is the shore, and the waves keep crushing in.
So, how are you?
Fantastic and wonderful.
And what was the first song you ever wrote about?
I think the first song that I wrote about was a place I used to hang out when I was a young boy. A place where all my friends hung out. And it was a place called The Tree.
Okay, so you
But it was short for Coventry. And it was an area that all my friends hung out, skaters and stuff, before shows, after shows, and it was like a hangout spot. So I wrote about that song, that place, that special place.
Okay, sound. And I heard that you coming from a punk rock hardcore background.
Mm-hmm.
So is there a difference to come into a metal band?
Absolutely.
What was the difference between hardcore and metal then?
Well, I think with this band there was a mixture of hardcore in it, so it definitely opened the door to me to want to hear more of Sepultura before I was even in the band. It made it more interesting for me. I think the big difference for me growing up especially were the lyrical content. A lot of hardcore and punk rock was a lot of writing about political, social issues, certain things like that. There was also a mix of people at shows, different ethnicities, different cultures at hardcore and punk rock shows. At metal shows it was mostly like white kids, just white men, and the lyrics were really silly for me. I couldn't really understand about dragons and demons and things like that, where I thought that was interesting, but at the time I couldn't. It wasn't real for me. It wasn't tangible for me to really to understand, to really get behind. You know, there were more things talking about Reagan at the time he was president when I started listening to punk and hardcore, that people were writing songs about Reaganomics, about the things that were happening at that time, like real things. And so for me that was a big difference between the two scenes, or at least what I was hearing in the metal scene. Then I think the metal scene grew a lot. You know, there started to be more interesting things about it.
And what did shape your mind then to be able to write songs like The Age of the Atheist?
Mm-hmm.
And
I think traveling, meeting people, growing up, learning a lot about just what's happening around in the world, you know, people's perceptions. I was growing up living in a city, and I didn't have the chance to travel so much, but once I got older, started playing more music, playing in bands and traveling to Sepultura, I was able to talk to people and go to places and see the perception of things and see how a lot of things are going on in the world.
But with that song and Bliss of Ignorance, is that what situation pissed you off at this moment then? Because
Okay.
you know.
Well, especially at the age of the atheist, this is a lot of people really don't have a belief in anything. You know, they don't believe in anything. You know, they're very negative with most things in their life and everything around them. They lost their belief in the political system and their parents and their friends. And so then I felt this was something that's very relevant, that happens with a lot of people, where they kind of lose their belief. And so it's kind of like that time period where people have kind of lost their belief and faith in anything, especially in themselves.
But that's why there wasn't a certain situation, because
No,
you
it wasn't.
you're having probably that mindset since a long time. So
No, I think it's just one idea. It doesn't mean that I'm that way. It just means there's some part of me that has felt that way, like all the other songs. Each song is just a piece of a feeling, you know. And so it's like okay, I want to write about this feeling. That's what that song was about, writing about the lack of faith that a lot of people have in everything.
There's no certain situation.
No, there was no certain situation particularly with me, but there were situations where I felt like a lack of faith in humanity, where people have just been complete fucking assholes and you just they've done the dumbest things, and they haven't, and I just don't understand it. And of course, I've had like those feelings, but it was never just one time that's happened. It's happened numerous times. But the bliss of ignorance. I've been living in Brazil, and there's a lot of things in the culture as far as there's not a lot of education that's happening there, unfortunately. And then there's a lot of people just watch TV, watch soap operas, and live in this bliss of happiness, temporary happiness, and being ignorant. And that's not just in Brazil, that's everywhere though. A lot of different places, especially in the US.
How you write songs as a band? Is it just like, for example, at the Alex, you all get maybe the book and you read through and then you collect songs? But for this last album, how does it work? You come together?
Well, usually pick out a time period we're going to write the album, so we go every day, like 5 days a week, from maybe 1 to 5, and just put out ideas as far as writing a riff, drum beats, and then talk about maybe it'd be cool to write a topic about this or this, and just converse. Some days you have things that are really cool and record everything every day. On other days you may not have anything, but keep doing that for a period of time until something comes together. And it usually does, along with the idea of where the direction of the album might go, and the idea of the lyrics or topics, just like conversations with usually me and Andreas.
And who wrote all the electronic arrangements or the classical orchestra arrangements on this?
Depending on which album, Andreas will usually write like a simple part, and then we'd send it to people or friends who are part of an orchestra, and have them do their own particular writing. Give them the space, like, here's what we have. You do whatever you want to do, and go in the direction that you want to do.
Okay, and on Manipulation of Tragedy, you portray the media. What sources of information do you use regularly, or how do you get informed over what do you...
A lot from newspapers, magazines, internet, actual people, because we do travel around a lot, and many times it's easier just to ask the person that's living in a place where it's completely screwed up or something's happening, like, what's going on in your country? I read about this, and it's like, oh yeah, there's been a protest because of this and this and this. Match it up with information from the media, maybe in the US, along with like an international news source, which is different from the US.
And what did you bring to read?
I like, sometimes The Guardian, CNN, Fox. I like to read every news source, actually. Any of those I like to read, because usually they're a little bit different from each other. I don't necessarily believe in everything that's being said, but I just like to know like the basis of what's going on, and try to figure out facts from that.
What fine artists do you like?
There's an artist, his name is like Stefan Dortskov. He's a Brazilian artist. He did the artwork for Dante 21. He's continually doing a lot of expositions and shows in Brazil and outside of Brazil. But I continually like to go to his shows and love his work.
Okay. Sam, thank you.
Yeah, no problem.